Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm just going to give a very brief review of student levels. Sometimes you hear people talking about a student being a low level, high level, advanced, beginner. What exactly does that mean? How do we, in a way, qualify that? To some extent, maybe quantify. How do we understand, or how do we know a student is a certain level and not another level? There are all kinds of different guidelines these days. One that comes to my mind is the ACTFL proficiency guidelines, but everybody's got their own version of it. And so I'm just going to present to you very basic levels or very basic classifications and the ideas behind them. And it's going to be more on the speaking aspect, and that seems to be where people spend a lot of their time. But you can also apply these to writing as well, the other output skill. Now, let's begin with Novice, and I'm just going to show you just a narrative on Novice. Now, in this case, the student can barely speak English. Let me erase that, and there we go. Student can barely speak English. In other words, they're having a hard time. Probably one-word answers much of the time, very limited expressions, and simple words. I'm going to say this person is someone who probably very reserved in class. Teacher asks a question, they kind of smile. They don't really know how to answer. And of course, you can relate this to children, teens, adults, even seniors. This is all based on level, not age, okay? So language level. And they may not understand perfectly what the teacher is saying, and so the teacher may need to repeat what they are saying and even simplify the words. Okay? And they also have pronunciation that is, you have to exert a lot of energy to understand. And one way that I teach people how you can level, using that as a verb, how you can level a language learner is how much effort has to be exerted in your mind, sometimes physically, but how much effort has to be exerted to understand what that person is trying to communicate. Or, on the other side, how much effort do you have to expend to help that person understand what it is that you're trying to communicate? So that can be a good way to help you gauge, low level, high level. Okay, so that's Novice. Next we have low beginner. They do find it somewhat difficult to express themselves. They can use the common expressions and common words. When I say common, you know what's common. Hey, how are you? Fine, thank you. And you? How was your weekend? Good. I mean, they can use the common expressions. They can use the common words, and we call those actually high-frequency vocabulary, meaning words that are often used in interactions. They're not really able to make complete sentences, whereas the novice previously really couldn't go beyond words. Here they cannot quite make complete sentences, and certainly the verb tense is going to be off. Talking about the past when they mean the present, talking about the present when they mean the past. I mean, there's going to be some difficulty there. And again, the teacher does have to simplify and repeat. So how much repeating does the teacher have to do? How much exertion does the teacher have to do? And I wouldn't even say teacher, by the way. I would say just the interlocutor or the person speaking with the language learner. Okay? And how much effort and time has to be given into understanding their meaning on their end and on your end. Okay, so that's low beginner. And I realize, of course, it would be nice to have examples of that. We could probably find examples, but at this point, I haven't been able to do that. I haven't been able to put that together, but I would encourage you to just observe your language learners and try to put them into one of these categories. Okay? And next we have high beginner. So we went from low to high, but frankly, there can also be just a regular old beginner level. So you can gauge them. This is not a law. There's no language level proficiency police going to come to the teacher's house if you use a different terminology. But we're just classifying it as low, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and then adding little shades of gray to each one. Now let's get into the high beginner level. And this person can understand English based on context, okay? So if you're talking to them, you're already engaged in a conversation about travel, they can follow along and they can answer and respond in kind. They can express themselves to a level that you can understand. You can follow what they're saying. Even though they have a limited vocabulary, you can still kind of follow along with what they're trying to say and how they're expressing themselves. They can make simple sentences, and they can even form questions. It's very difficult for the lower levels to even create questions. But in the case of the high beginner, they can create those questions. Now, the teacher may need to repeat, or the speaker may need to repeat themselves, but it shouldn't be too much. It shouldn't be overexertion of energy. Maybe they didn't quite catch it. Maybe you have to speak a little slower and repeat it. Maybe without simplifying the words, just repeat it in a more careful manner for them to understand. Moving on, lower intermediate. Now, the lower intermediate, they can understand a lot of what they encounter in conversations and in teaching settings. They're certainly able to communicate what they want to say. They are still having some difficulty probably with the vocabulary, with idiom, and in some cases there's still an accent, but it is certainly not an overpowering accent that you couldn't understand. They certainly have a little more mastery of English grammar. They can pretty much tell you past means past, present means present, future means future, and even what they're doing now. They should be able to do that. They do have a vocabulary that might even be somewhat impressive to a teacher, but to a native speaker or someone they're conversing with, they may not notice that, but a teacher might pick up, wow, their vocabulary is pretty good on this in this learner. Okay, so they do tend to be able to read and understand, whereas the previous levels, reading is somewhat difficult for some of them. The lower intermediate certainly can understand just to a good extent. And a lot of this, guys, it's really hard to specifically say everyone fits into one of these little categories, but these are just general ideas to help you kind of gauge in your mind where your learner is. Okay, and let's go on now to the intermediate level, and this is a level that many language teachers enjoy because it means that this student can basically participate in conversations and even discussions. This student can respond to questions fairly easily. You don't have to really repeat anything. They don't have a lot of difficulty expressing their thoughts. And they do have a basic command of grammar. They can kind of mix and match and do with it what they need to do in communicating. And also their vocabulary is pretty good. I will not say most impressive, but certainly impressive to a teacher. who has been teaching lower levels for a long time, the intermediate is somewhat refreshing, and they're fluent. The intermediate level is able to converse with you. It's almost like you're having a conversation with somebody who's not learning English. So there's a lot of enjoyment for the teacher in that case. Not too much effort is given by the teacher or the communicator to understand, but there are cases where the student's not sure how to express themselves, and they can use different expressions, and you might be taken back by some of the expressions they use. Wow, I didn't know they used it. And let's move on to upper intermediate. This one is certainly someone who you can converse with. The upper intermediate level is just a step below the advanced level. And so this person is able to completely understand and use statements and questions in a normal situation. Okay? Let me erase that there. In a normal situation. Normal situation is a setting or a situation that is common among people. What am I talking about? Maybe renting a car, renting a hotel room, traveling in an education setting. So they can pretty much relate to those situations. They don't have very much difficulty at all reading and comprehending what they're reading, and they can certainly express themselves even better than the intermediate level or the lower intermediate. Okay. Good grammar skills. Occasionally you'll notice something. You'll say something's not quite right there, but it's probably preposition use more than tense, verb tense, and nouns and things of that nature. So nothing to get really upset about, because you can certainly understand it. They're even confident, because they can express themselves so well, they're even confident to do that. They'll face you, they won't just smile and do that. They'll actually be able to converse with confidence. And they are almost fluent, not quite, but they're there. They're really close. When we get to the advanced level, these are the ones, again, these are the treats for teachers and, of course, people they converse with. Again, I remind you, how much energy do you have to expend to understand what they're saying? Or how much energy do you have to expend to get them to understand what you are communicating? So this is, again, this is a gauge that I hope will help you. Okay? Now, they can understand different conversations in varied settings, a wider range of situations. And again, it's very easy for a student to talk about, a low-level student can talk about introduction. They can introduce themselves. They can talk about their job. They can talk about school and home. These are very basic, limited situations. But can they express, for example, if it's a university student, can they express details about their major? Can they tell you about why they perhaps chose that major? Can they tell you about the future of that education major or that career field? So these are things of varied situations. In other words, we're just broadening the ability of the learner to speak. Again, that's a good gauge. Are they only able to answer limited questions about a limited situation or limited situations? Or, wow, you can ask them many different things and they can kind of keep answering. Or you can have them read different things and they have something to say about everything. So that's a good gauge to tell you if they're advanced or not. They can certainly communicate their ideas. And reading and even writing are not great difficulties to the advanced level learner. They certainly are going to speak fluently and confidently. And so that should be a treat. Again, I keep saying treat, but it's a treat. Because if you, as a teacher, you've encountered low levels and you've exerted energy 8 hours a day in classes of low-level learners, it's refreshing to have someone you can communicate with who can respond back. So that's why I keep saying it in that way. It's a treat. Of course, the lower-level learners want to improve, and that's why they're in your class. So the chances of a teacher encountering upper intermediate advanced level, I think, would be kind of uncommon in this career field. Predominantly, it's going to be lower, intermediate, and lower. So let's move on to the final level. This is the proficient, and this is the one who's ready, I think, to take the English proficiency tests, such as IELTS or TOEIC, TOEFL. This is the person who should do well in those kinds of exams, or tests, I should say. They can certainly speak fluently, and here's the key here, spontaneous. They can spontaneously change subjects. They can spontaneously ask you questions related to what you answer. So it's almost like a reversal if you're the teacher in that respect. They're well aware of general or social topics, and I would also say the advanced level is too. But the proficient level, they're pretty much near native speaking, and they sound very much like a native in their vocabulary, their grammar, their idiom, fluency. Now there might be a little hint or a lot of hint of accent. Just because someone has an accent, don't make the mistake of saying their level is low. It's cultural sometimes, and it's based on their first language. Sometimes, for example, Koreans and Japanese, hard time with the LR. But that does not mean that because they have a hard time with that, they cannot be at a proficient or advanced level. Don't make that mistake as teachers, okay? Don't expect perfect accent or perfect pronunciation. Okay, now pronunciation should be a part of the proficiency level, but the absolute removal of accent, don't expect that. Can the person respond to you? Can they interact with you? Can they converse with you? That's the idea. And can they answer questions from text? Can they paraphrase? Can they summarize? Can they give you the gist? Can they write well? So these are things that you have to consider as a teacher before you label a student low or high. Remember that it's also going to affect their image. It's going to affect their motivation, and you have the potential as a teacher to kind of really lower their motivation, demotivate them, or you have the potential as a teacher to motivate them. Okay, so don't mislabel your students based only on accent. Okay, look at the whole picture. And so to finish up the proficient level, they can understand advanced text. I'm thinking maybe higher level news journals, educational materials, textbooks, no problem for these guys. And they can, I like the term master. They can master grammar and mix and match, and they don't have a problem with Yoda speech. You know, if they watch Star Wars and they listen to Yoda, they don't freak out. They can understand it fine, even though sometimes even native speakers have to scratch their head. I'm just using that as an example. But they can master use of English, and they don't have a hard time understanding different forms or variations in grammar. So they're no problem. And in this case also, they probably are able to use prepositions fairly well at the proficient level. And they're able to function. This is actually the ultimate goal of language teachers. We want the language learner to function well in the language learning or the language environment that they are seeking to enter. Okay, whether that's educational setting, whether that's a business setting, and it could very well be just to live. Okay, so in just an everyday life setting. So that's our goal for our learners, right? What they want should be our goal also. And so that's all for the proficiency levels. And just a very quick review. Novice, low beginner, high beginner. You can insert in here also beginner to give you an additional shade. Sometimes you're not quite, it's not really low, not really high, so beginner's fine. Low intermediate, intermediate, upper intermediate, no problem, advanced, and proficient. I wouldn't put too many shades of gray here with advanced. Either they're advanced or they're proficient. But thank you, and if you have questions, feel free to let me know. And remember, it all goes down to how much energy has to be exerted. So just keep that in mind as you label or level your students. All right, everyone. Thanks. Happy teaching.